Listen and subscribe to The Table of Truth on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Welcome, everybody, to The Table of Truth. This is Blerdlines. We're here recapping The Expanse final season 6. With me, as always, is
the other Cam, the one black man that hasn't watched Spider-Man yet. So, whatever.
As well as
this is Josh, aka Josh.
And rounding out the 4 is
it's D, the professor. I'm going to drop knowledge, the hard truth, as always.
AKA burn through everything in a week.
Yes, machine mind.
Yes. All right, so we're at episode 2, final season of Expanse. This episode was called the Azure Dragon. Synopsis real quick. With an unexpected passenger aboard the Rocinante, Holden and crew undertake a dangerous mission and could shift the balance of power in the war. Drummer decides to make an uneasy alliance, and Philip wrestles with his guilt, aka this nigga dumb.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, let me start off. These last 2 episodes have started off with this girl and this dragon. I have no idea what this is about or where it's going to lead to. Somebody in this chat may know some foreshadowing, but I'm still confused. We were mentioning offline, Josh, you were talking about, or Cam, you were saying that some of the hardcore Expanse folks are not into the show as much. Josh was kind of expounding on, like, this is slow burn every season. If you guys want to further elaborate that. I mean, I like it. I'm not familiar with the Expanse lore and the books and whatnot, but you guys convinced me to watch it. I've been hooked ever since. So to those who may not like it, I don't understand, but maybe you guys can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, man.
I can slow burn. It's not, it's not the typical show that has, like, act 1 is this and act 2 is that and act 3 is that. Like, it's got its own structure. It follows the books, as D'Angelo can attest. It follows the books pretty closely, and it doesn't need to do anything that it doesn't, as cryptic as this sounds, it doesn't need to do anything that it doesn't do. You know what I mean? Like, it's got its own, it's got its own movement. It's got its own pacing, and it does the job, in my opinion. Like, there's no wasted screen time. There's no wasted, there's no time wasted on needless exposition. Everything happens for a reason. Everything that's included in the show does what it's supposed to do. So, for me, they've earned my patience. They've earned all of my patience.
Yeah.
And so,
I was talking to someone that hasn't seen it yet, and that's how I described it. I was like, it's a deliberate, slow burn, but then there's a payoff, and they land the plane every time.
Every time.
So I think with that, it allows me to be like, I'm not like, this is the final season, but they're treating it like almost like another season. And so there's not like, oh, we got to rush to make sure we tie up all these loose ends. They're like, no, we're telling a narrative. This is where we're going, and this is how it's going to do it. And there's already been foreshadowing that there might be a couple of things released later on down the road. There might be a movie. There might be a couple of movies, whatever. The final book just released. Was it 2 weeks ago, D'Angelo? Something like that?
Yeah, it was November 29th.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks ago. So, but yeah, for this episode, we got to see the return of D'Angelo's love interest, Bobby.
Oh, yes. Bobby Draper. Yes.
She finally getting some action again because she's bored as hell just being a politician, which is hilarious. But also, too, you get to see some redemption for Peaches because, she has been, she was a major villain in like one whole arc of a story. And now she's been kind of like putting in that work to kind of show that she's like, hey, I'm actually here to try to, be a part of the crew. Like, at this point, I like her more than Naomi because Naomi's fucking up all the time.
Yeah. Naomi.
Why do you hate black women?
Damn it.
Naomi's super.
Why do you hate black women, Ken?
Sorry, D'Angelo, say it again. Say it again, D'Angelo.
I said Naomi is really traumatized at this point. She's like still dealing with the aftermath. It's funny because Naomi is sort of hit with the traumas all at once since, physically she was kidnapped and had to go through probably the worst form of escape and survival ever, which is survive the vacuum space.
Yeah,
well, let's put it like this. There's two things I'm not sure. Maybe D'Angelo, you can explain this. Now, with not Amos, what was the guy that they bumped off the show that died? The character's name?
Alex.
Yeah.
If he didn't die, would Peaches be on this ship?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that I know. I thought that was just something they wrote in, right? But like you said, with Naomi, it's almost like a cop that's too personally involved and they need that leave and takes time away from this case. It seems like that's for Naomi. She needs to take a step back and take a step back because a lot of her decisions are being very impacted by her own personal behavior, especially in last season, dealing with her son being alive, being that who her once partner, who he's on the other end of the spectrum, and her dealing with fighting her own people. Yeah. She's got some things to grip with, On one side, she wants to do the moral rights thing, but on the other side, she's a belter at heart, So
and I think that was the real thing that they had established, even starting in the last episode and continuing over to this one. She is a belter, and now she is
Belteloda.
Belter. She was the belter who fought the inners and the oppressors, and now here she is at the moment of supposedly belter prominence, at serving as an arm to bring that down. So that definitely is felt and seen in the characters. I think actions and behavior. I think for me, one of the things that I like about the character, because I agree, these first two episodes, she's kind of had these moments where you're like, come on, Naomi, you're better than that. Like, for just a quick example, I was saying this to Josh in a joking way, like when Bobby is like, I'll board the Azure Dragon and I'll make short work of the four belts.
Yeah, the four belters that were on it.
Snarky remark, like, sure you will. I'm like, but Naomi, like, that's Bobby, though. Like, Bobby would make short work of Earthers, Martians, belters, like anybody.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what Naomi and Bobby gonna do against Peaches, man. Like, y'all got
exactly.
Peaches got the dental implantation that could take all you guys out with a blue eye. So
basically.
Yeah, and I think that was the whole thing, is that, Bobby is a weapon even without her armor, but especially with her armor, she's a super weapon.
For real.
It wasn't a moment to get offended, but, all those things, like you pointed out, Cam, swirling through her mind and not being able to have a break from it, because there is no break from it.
Yeah, exactly.
They're in it, not only in this great war against Marco, but then there's this looming alien threat that nobody but Holden is really paying attention to. So
although they do a good job of humanizing her, and her whole thing with PTSD from her spacewalk that nearly killed her.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it doesn't make sense. You still want to, because they're these super heroic characters, you want her to be like, just plowing through stuff. But, there's an emotional component to all of this stuff. And occasionally you have a moment where you're like, yo, I nearly died this last time that I did a spacewalk. Yeah. And so playing that up a little bit, while I agree with you, it slows things down a little bit, and you kind of look at the character like, come on, dog. At the same time, it does humanize her. It does give her a wrinkle and makes her a little bit more, it makes things a little bit more personal.
Yeah, and grounds the narrative in a really way that they've been building towards. This is a grounded narrative where these things don't just have a Deus Ex Machina way of solving themselves.
Yeah, and also with Naomi kind of like going through her thing, that actually leaves an opportunity for someone like Peaches to kind of like prove herself, to show that she actually like wants to be here. She wants to be part of the crew. So her like stepping up and like, catching Naomi when she falls was actually pretty dope. And then the moment when Naomi actually helps her when she was a little bit lost, like, oh shit, I don't know which one it is. Naomi's walking her through it. She fixes it. And then to bookend that, Holden comes in, And again, Amos, who's always the best, he was like, "Yeah, I need to talk to her." He's like, "All right, cool, man, go and talk."
It doesn't leave. Exactly. It doesn't, the quick little pause of Holden looking at him and then realizing, wait, it's Amos, and just keep going.
Yep.
It's
so
earned.
Good.
Really
so
earned.
good.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And so when he chewed her out, but then he still said her as part of the crew, that moment where like Peaches finally feels accepted, there, I thought that was dope. Cause it kind of showed that whole part where it shows the beginning of it, the middle, and now the end, where he's just kind of like, yo, don't do that shit again. Because if you're part of the crew, you got to make sure this is the team. And he left, and then she's like, happy about it because now that was the first time he actually said that she's part of the crew, which is a big deal, especially on the Rocinante, where it's like, they have the same people all the time since Alex had passed, or even before it, even Bobby too.
It's one of those definitely humanizing moments where she's a person that was previously seen as a villain is now, getting that moment where it's a little bit of redemption, but at the same time, it's not, he didn't, say, "Oh, I forgive you." And this is but he said, "I realized that I made this mistake by not making it clear where you stand on the ship. And so here I'm going to fix that." And they managed to do that within 40 something minutes, cleared up the mistrust between Bobby and Clarissa, softened the animus between Naomi towards Clarissa, dealt with Naomi's real trauma, and probably don't have to return to it because there probably won't be any opportunities for her to do another spacewalk. So it's very, very clever. Right. That's why, I think I laud about the writing so much. Is not just the A to Z of what the characters do or what they show us, but just how they strategically put those things into play.
Yeah. Cam, you were going to say something?
Yeah. Few things. Going back to Naomi real quick. How from the beginning of the season, she was the most sound of mind to where she is now. Not to say she's crazy or anything. It's just that her decisions can be questioned, whereas for it was like, Naomi knows the answer, kind of where Holden was kind of like lost, still trying to figure it out. And like Holden's now, no hesitation, making quick decisions. It's funny, it only took 2 episodes for Peaches to get accepted. You're right. She didn't have a place. There wasn't any resolution from last season going into this season where Peaches stood on the Rocinante. It was just like, oh, she's here. And the cool thing and the simple thing about Alex is his mind works like a child. You're either in or out. There's no gray area.
Oh,
there's occasional gray area. Excuse me, not Alex, Amos. And like, he has a childlike mentality, whether it be accepting the truth, et cetera, et cetera. So he looks at Peaches and says, "Okay, will you accept me?" He's like, "Okay, yeah, cool. You until I can't accept you anymore." And it's been like that. Now Amos has some deeper layers. It's not as simple as that, because we saw a few episodes back in the previous season where we get some backstory of who he really is. But like I said, it's like you start off with a good grade with Amos until you don't have a good grade, and then you're out of the circle. And that's the beauty of Amos' character.
And he's been through a lot of trauma and seeing real monsters versus people who are sort of shaped and molded into monsters based on their conditions and their environments. And Clarissa was one such monster that he instantly recognized when he had the moment to. Because remember, there was a time where Amos was literally trying to kill her. Like, he literally asks the priest lady, he tells her, like, "You're gonna regret not killing her." He's like, I can even set the auto doc to give her an overdose. She won't kill nothing. So to see that, remember that, and have that in mind to where he is now. It does, even though he is a sociopath, it speaks to the level of where he is, and that's what keeps him as, okay, this is one of the hero characters in the story, because he can take this person who was literally who murdered people to murder his friend, to try to murder his friend, and see that there's still some humanity left in her, and enough to take the chance of bringing her along on this ride.
Yeah, and I think that even we talk about all the time, but the last scene or the second to last big scene in the last season where Amos talks to Holden, he's like, "Hey man, I try to kill you, you try to kill me, we good though, right?" Holden was just kind of like, "Yeah, man, we good." He's like, "Cool, just wanted to make sure we got that established. All right, you good?" And then Peaches comes in, and Holden is like, "Wait, what the fuck?"
yeah, he's like, "What just happened?" Yeah.
But he went one extreme to the other.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, he trusts Amos. So boom, that's all needs to be said. And I think that even with Bobby was like, "Why the fuck is this murderer on your ship?" And he's like, "Yo, Amos brought her. I trust Amos." Then that's all that needs to be said. And I think that level of trust within that group, especially the dynamic of Holden and Amos from the very beginning show all the way to now, it shows that growth, but then also shows the checks and balances. Because if it wasn't for Holden, Amos would be killing people pretty much all the time.
Oh yeah, and with something that Amos has acknowledged, like when he was on Earth, he said, "I got to get back to my ship because when I'm out here in the wild, I am that apex predator. Like it's nothing to me to kill somebody if I need what they have, and I feel like." That's it's nothing to him, and that you even saw that was a fine line with Clarissa. Like she wasn't willing to let people just stay behind and die. She wasn't willing to. She had a problem with killing that guy, even though he had a gun on them and things like that. So, yeah, it is interesting that the human things that ground these characters and tether them to each other and to this world. And then you have this hard science overlayer where it creates puzzles for them to have to solve. And then you throw the political and war stuff in there. It's just like a recipe for that really good, strong sci-fi science fiction.
And I think it's great that Amos has that level of self-awareness because he says like you pointed out, he says over and over throughout the previous season, "Yo, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to get back to my ship.
Yeah. Yep. He's about to slip back to you. You don't want the old me.
He's like, "Yo, this is bad. I need to get out of here." Yeah. And not because he's worried about his own his own safety. He can handle himself. Yeah. He's worried about what he's going to do being reintroduced into that situation.
Yeah, he's a chameleon. Like he can be dropped into any situation and survive, and that's his thing. And so he knows himself well enough to know, like, I can be the best self if I got this element, or I could be my worst self if I'm in that.
Yeah, and I think also it's good that, like, even in these past 2 episodes, each time he's like, "Yo, man, we ain't getting paid for this. Like, should we get paid?"
Yeah.
And everyone was like, "Dude, we're not mercenaries." He's like, "I mean, but still, like,
yeah,
maybe we could talk to the old lady."
Wait, in episode 1 of season 6, they also said we're not mercenaries, but we're not also something else. They're calling it in between.
Amos
said, but we're not soldiers either.
Yeah. So they're like in between, and I think that's the thing where I like that, Amos is, again, he's like, I would actually just rather stay on the moon and just drink and hang out. But my homies are over here trying to be the heroes again. He's like, damn it.
Yeah, and I don't want to abandon them. And I think that's we talked about it last time, and we see that they're continuing to show that at the same time that Holden is fully invested in trying to bring down Marco. He's also very much worried about what's going on at the ring gates and the transit. So that to see Amos point that out again, as I said on the last review of episode 1, that you see that struggle with Holden, and we've seen this in the past where when he sees big picture, he'll abandon the micro, the event at hand, what's having the conflict at hand. And so for Amos to say, look, man, don't abandon. I want to be out here drinking somewhere on the moon, but it's you that's keeping me here. Don't get on your prophecy and Messiah business right now. We can't afford it. Yeah. If it's going to destroy us, let it be a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, it's even with Bobby kind of getting back on, because again, Bobby's a military chick, and she will snap your neck real quick. And and Holden was on some legs. We got to destroy the ship. Bop, bop, bop. It's like, and Bobby's like, nah, man. Old lady said we got to keep it. And he's like, yeah, but we might, and they kept fighting back and forth. But then even in that moment, Holden was like, you know what? There's a reason she's here, and let me defer to her, even though he might not agree with it. But then in the end, it was a better thing overall. And I think again, that's that level of trust where Bobby went from kind of being that random Martian military chick to now a trusted member in their crew. Where like
she's the liaison advisor.
Yeah, it's dope that they trust her enough, and the old lady too. Where it's like one of my favorite moments from all the seasons is when they finally all come back together, and the old lady's in the ship, and they're all talking and comparing notes and stuff like that, kind of showing that like at the end of the day, they're all kind of reaching towards the same goal. So let's like share info, like actually like come together. And so there's a level of trust with all of them where they're just like, all right, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I trust that you're trying to do something good. So let's rock. And so
and I think Holden realized that as well. It's like, we can easily destroy the ship. It's right here. We have the weapons. It's not a fighter ship. But if we could get that info and successfully get it, then we turn the tide. That was a great moment when he relented to Bobby because obviously, and she put that real command voice in him, like, I have mission command, like this shit will stop when I say stop, and that was it. That was it.
Yeah. Let me pose a question, you guys, and I'm jumping ahead again. I guess the previous seasons, the real enemy was the proto molecule. It's still the enemy now, going forward.
Ooh, that's a complicated question.
I was gonna say, Angelo.
You gotta answer that without spoilers.
Yeah, so I can do that. I can answer that without spoilers. I would say that the proto-molecule was enemy is strong, and this is without spoiling it. Think about what we saw with the proto-molecule. It was never really an enemy as much as it was unknown tech that humans got their hands on and unleashed. And so going forward, the proto-molecule is still at play because it's the proto-molecule that made it possible for them to have access to 1,300 solar systems, new worlds, and, basically create a human galactic empire. So in idea anyway, if not in practice. So it's still a player on the board.
Okay.
It's still
I was curious because it seems like the proto molecule is taking a back seat to Marco and his devious deeds. And
so now speaking about Marco and his progeny, we got to see the fallout from episode 1 after freaking Philip shot his homie and got thrown in the brig, and then he gets out because he got support. And I like in the moment where Marco was like, "Yo, we would do the same shit that you would do, but then the next day we'd be ready to rock. You're over here fucking up, and then still fucking up the next day." He's like, "That's I didn't have anyone to freaking bail me out when I did some dumb shit. Like you do, and you're squandering it." And I think that was a good moment of like, because I think at the end of the day, he knows that Philip's wilding out. That's probably the reason why he's been letting him wild. But then the fact that he crossed that line, that's when it's just like, all right, now let's really talk because you know
what I took from that is that he's more like his mother than he is his father, and his father failed as a father. Not built for this.
Yep. I totally took that too. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's both great points, observations about Philip in that he is more like Naomi and in more than one way, because now he's starting to realize and understand what exactly he means to Marco, as opposed to just a son and a potential heir. And that moment of chastisement I thought was great, because in the first episode, Marco was more on his very much antagonistic vibe, where you see him more as a villain than as a human, as an individual with obviously he's committed this great act, but he did it with a with human motivations behind it. And so you see him this week not as just the leader of the Belter Nation and Free Navy and terrorists, but you see him in the role of father, having to school his son on the way of the world, because clearly his son is lost. But at the same time, there's a sense of needing to manipulate Philip in everything that he does and says.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a good part of that bite and edge in his chastising of Philip.
Yeah, Marco's still a bastard at the end of the day. Like he's like, I'm gonna be nice and sweet father figure for 2 seconds. All right, so who we killing next?
Yeah, no, he's still a narcissistic asshole, basically.
He's still a terrorist. Man, if he has to go through his son and sacrifice his son for the Yellowstone, he will to get the means in. He's trying to father figure and shape him in the mold that he is and fight for his people. But if his son is going to act out, it can't be between him and his son, or the quote unquote liberation of the Belters and all that comes with it, he'll sacrifice his son because he sacrificed his partner.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, we have Ava Sorella, who's still on Earth trying to like hold this shit together. And she's in rare forms as always. And I like that she finally let in journalist chick from last season and kind of gave her exactly what this journalist chick been wanting to do for the longest time. And she's just like, yo, I want you to do your do.
Yeah.
and show what it is. And I like that they had that kind of back and forth where she was just kind of like, oh, you're trying to make me do some propaganda shit. And she's like, nah, I don't need that. Like, you do what you do. And that just happens to be helping me.
Yeah. And knowing that the problem has always been and always is in these situations, fiction or otherwise, when you have an otherism situation, is that it's neither side sees the other as human beings, as people who have lost things, have stuff to have, or at stake. It's the whole thing. No one sees themselves as villains in their own story. So if we can get the Belters to think about Earthers in that way, and that their grudges with Earthers are not with these individual people that they need to snuff out, but was with a regime or a faction or something like that, in the same way that Earth and Mars's conflict is not with the entire belt. They don't need to go and destroy all of the belt as much as they need to cull Marco and the people who feel similar to him. So that was definitely a good move, and shows why Avasarala is such a great political maneuverer. And even in that last moment when she's like, when Monica is like, you give a good guilt speech, and she's like, I have practice. I practice all the time in the mirror, basically saying, this is how I hold that same standard for myself. Like I literally will guilt myself into doing the thing that's hard, because that's what needs to be done. So yeah, it's hitting on all cylinders in terms of its getting us to that point. I just wanted to make one quick observation about the proto-molecule. It is still very much playing a role, but just in very subtle building in the background. The cold open is very much about the proto-molecule, but again, subtle being built in the background. Definitely the whole reason that Marco is able to be in the position that he's in is because he was able to trade the sample of proto-molecule to the rogue Martian breakaway fleet.
Yeah, and so I remember that because I rewatched the final episode of last season, and then as I was watching this one, and then it reminded me that rogue Martian fleet, they went to a planet called Laconia, and so that cold open has been at that spot both times. So kind of reminded me of that. So lastly, final observations, like so far, like how are you guys feeling? We got like 4 episodes left, and so I haven't read the book, only D'Angelo has, but it seems like there's a lot. But I'm curious, how do you guys feel? Are they going to land it? What's the consensus? We'll start with Josh.
I think what they're going to do is, and D'Angelo and I have talked about this relentlessly, but I feel like what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead with the remaining episodes and then either wrap it up with a movie or a couple movies, because there's no way that all this stuff that's dangling out there that they've set up is going to be able to get resolved in 4 episodes. I don't see it.
Yeah, me no, same. I do not see it. I'm like, I actually don't even want it to be resolved. Like, just tell a good story in 6 episodes, and then they'd be like, "Hey guys, we got 3 movies in the can coming later." Cool.
Yeah,
completely fine with that. I don't need a wrap up of every storyline in the next 4 episodes.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see how.
Cam.
Yeah, I'm kind of piggybacking off you guys. Like I said, this is unfamiliar territory. I'm just kind of riding the wave. If they do a few movies or 2, I'm okay with unresolved resolutions, because we've seen in previous shows where we tried to rush story arcs and fit everything in like 6 episodes, how bad they can go. Yeah. So I'm willing to. And if this says, "Hey, we ended here, read the book, figure out the ending," I'm fine with that too. You know, that's not a bad point.
Yeah. That's I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that'd be cool too, D'Angelo.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and obviously because I've read the books, I have kind of a sense based on what I've seen in the show where they're going and where they're probably going to end it off. I think where I believe they're going, I think they'll stick that landing, because I think there would be 2 parts to the ending. But I think a lot of that has to do with what they're setting up for beyond this iteration of the Expanse series. So I think they're going to stick the landing that they're planning, because nothing indicates to me that they're rushing. Nothing indicates to me that they're paying off things that have been established that are involved in the forefront, while continuing to build things that they had already been developing on the background.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Laconia cold open, and I think that's a big part of what they're kind of setting up for potential beyond the series, because there is no way that they're going to wrap the final 3 books in 4 episodes of TV.
That's insane. I think my only thing I would say is I kind of wish that it pushed time length wise. I think that I wish they would have went a little bit more BBC level. Like, you know, when they were doing like Sherlock Holmes or anything like that, they would usually come in about 120, maybe like 115, like solid time length. And I think that they probably they could have used that time pretty well. But overall, like, I think I'm like I said, I'm riding the wave, man. They haven't let me down. When I tell people, I'm like, yo, this is probably, for me personally, it's like top 3 sci-fi show I've ever watched. And so, and the last season hasn't even finished yet, so I'm super curious to see how it all wraps up.
Well, all I'm saying is they made Thomas Jane watchable, so I was like, watch it. I was like, dude, they got Punisher here. I don't know if I want to watch this. Oh, cool. He's like, nah, man, give it a chance. He's like, I know it's Thomas Jane, but you gotta watch it. All right.
I think we all had to get over the Thomas Jane issue first, because that was the same thing before I knew all that I know now, and before I was actually watching. I saw the trailers. I was like, there were 2 things: the fact that it was a sci-fi series, and that Thomas Jane was apparently
you're like the same thing when I recommended it to both of y'all. You're like, but Thomas Jane, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing? Where are you taking me?
Yeah, and the fact that it was on sci-fi. Those were the 2 things that every time I thought about the Expanse, because I kept moving towards it, because I had already known that the books were praised, like highly praised by George R.R. Martin. So I was like, okay, at the very least, the story is probably worth checking out.
Dope.
On sci-fi, I don't know, but I'm glad I gave it a chance, man, because I was totally wrong, totally off, and definitely top 3 sci-fi, and probably will finish as my number 1. I can almost guarantee it will.
I'm moving there too. All right, fellas. Well, this has been Blerdlines Table of Truth, and we are out.
Peace.
Peace.